Let's look at the architecture of American Art Deco movement as it represents the grandeur of the style and how public and present it was in its time. We cannot overlook the importance of the major architectural achievements along with their expressive ornamentation. Bas relief is of special interest in that contemporary recreations have been made from photographs of century-old intact installations. Many can be found today inside and outside of buildings that represent the grand style of the early 20th century. For a brief history of Art Deco, watch my first video in this series of the same name. Art Deco reliefs and statues did not all appear the same year, but many came after the 1925 Expo in Paris. In the case of the Channon Building, still at 42nd Street and Lexington Avenue in New York City, Irving Channon himself went to the Expo and returned with grand ideas of the art and architecture he was to apply to his Midtown New York City building. In 1927, for the many interior and lobby reliefs and exterior murals, he commissioned Rene Paul Chamberlain, a sculptor from New Jersey, to this magnificent and challenging task. Some of the themes of the Chamberlain reliefs in the lobby denote the city of opportunity, which touch on aspirational ideals, industrial power, and enlightenment, which was present within the ethos of the American Art Deco movement at the time. In addition to the interior reliefs, Chamberlain was also asked to produce a very long mural relief spanning the front of the building, depicting a stylized evolution at stops at birds to avoid controversy. John D. Rockefeller wanted to start building his enormous New York City office campus right at the start of the Great Depression. With investors fleeing, he self-funded the project and provided thousands of jobs right through the 1930s. Although the final project was not complete until 1940, many buildings and magnificent sculptures in the Art Deco style were erected and stand proudly to this day. Fine works by Noguchi, Laurie, Chamberlain, and others adorn the facades, lobbies, and courtyards of Rockefeller Center. Of special note are three iconic sculptures: God by Lee Laurie, Atlas, designed by Laurie and sculpted by Chamberlain, and the stainless steel relief News on the Associated Press building by Noguchi. Of course, there is a plethora of Art Deco murals, reliefs, and facades within and without the many halls of the center still on display today. And the building with God on the front of it is NBC's headquarters in New York City. New York City also boasted several skyscrapers representing Art Deco at its best, like the Empire State, Chrysler, and Radiator Building, to name a few. These exhibited very strong design motifs of Art Deco architecture with an emphasis on grandeur, wealth, and power. Enough cannot be said about the Chrysler Building, as it was driven by the sheer financial gravity of the namesake automobile mogul in the late 1920s, also Time Magazine Man of the Year for 1928. Completed in 1930, the Chrysler Building stands today as one of the best examples of Art Deco architecture. The lobby, facades, are designated New York City landmarks and defined what the spirit of the Machine Age Deco movement looked like. One cannot observe the building without mention of the fantastic stainless steel eagles atop the 61st floor of the Chrysler Building. Power companies received a good number of striking relief and sculpture works during the 1930s. A great example is the Niagara Mohawk Spirit of Light. This is on the very front of the Niagara Mohawk building in Syracuse, New York. The Spirit of Electricity bas-relief sits today on the facade of ComEd Substation Block 37 in the Chicago Loop. It was sculpted circa 1931 by celebrated sculptor Sylvia Shaw Judson, who was commissioned to decorate its facade with the Art Deco motif representing the essence of the Chicago Power Company. Although outside the U.S., another important power company building was the Toronto Hydro Building, built in 1933. It has several well-known bas-reliefs and heavily ornamented, majestic heads looking down on the street from above. Transportation was not overlooked in this period. Ships, planes, and automobiles received strong Art Deco motifs, sometimes merely aesthetic, and others quite functional. Hood ornaments for cars were widespread. This happened not only in North America but in Europe as well. An homage to the beauty and elegance of Art Deco is not complete without considering what was done in performance and cinema theaters around the world. In America, many are still standing and have been restored to their original grandeur as a reminder of how great they were in their time. Theaters such as the great L.A., Warner, and Wiltern, and Detroit's Fox Theater, a monument to the Art Deco theater explosion at the time. The exteriors of these palaces of entertainment were stupendous in their own right, but the full grandeur of the Art Deco style was on magnificent display in the ornate interiors from the ceilings down to the seats. American Art Deco was well represented in the architecture of the late 1920s and 1930s. Many of the buildings' exteriors and interiors have been maintained and express the original beauty they were intended to convey. There has been a long-running revival of interest in this style and continues to this day to excite and dazzle observers and collectors of the object d'art, as well as visits to the buildings where much of it still shines.